Lieutenant Commander Elias Ward had survived vacuum breaches, reactor fires, and 3 near-fatal skirmishes with raider fleets. But nothing in his military career had prepared him for standing alone beneath the throne-lit ceiling of an alien imperial tribunal. The chamber aboard the Auralin Sovereign, flagship of the Aural Dominion, was designed with one purpose: to crush the spirit of anyone summoned before it. Light shimmered across obsidian pillars carved with ancient war chronicles. Golden banners hung like silent judges. The ceiling arched so impossibly high that Elias felt like a barely relevant organism on an operating table. And above him, upon an elevated dais carved from translucent star opal, sat Empress Calith Varailos, the most powerful Aural in the galaxy, and easily the most arresting being Elias Ward had ever seen. The Aurals were already a visually striking species, tall, elegant, luminous-skinned, but Calith was something else entirely. Nearly 8 feet of poised authority. Silver-white hair flowing like liquid starlight. Eyes a luminous amethyst with faint corona rings drifting beneath the surface. And the markings across her arms, neck, and cheeks, organic fractal luminescence, shifted like living constellations. Every subtle shimmer meant something in her culture. Every gesture carried political weight. Right now, her markings carried a single message: controlled fury. Elias kept his back straight, hands locked at attention. Heart running like an engine on the verge of thermal runaway. The charges against him echoed through the chamber, read by an Aural adjudicator whose voice was impossibly calm for what the words meant. Lieutenant Commander Elias Ward is accused of unauthorized activation of Aural strategic communication systems, of intervening in a military scenario above his designated clearance, and of initiating tactical orders without Imperial sanction, directly disrupting the chain of convergence. Translation: he saved lives in the wrong way. The facts were simple enough. During a joint survey mission, Elias intercepted coded chatter indicating an ambush targeting a human medical shuttle. The Aural chain of command required deliberation periods, risk calculations, and 3 levels of approval before any action could be taken. That would have taken at least 14 minutes. The ambush would activate in 6. So Elias made the call. He hijacked the Aural frequency grid, jammed enemy channels, rerouted the shuttle, and coordinated a countersignal that cloaked its escape vector. The medical crew survived. The ambush failed spectacularly. And Elias had violated 8 separate Imperial protocols doing it. So now he stood here, on trial before a ruler whose reputation could turn star systems silent. Empress Calith finally spoke, and her voice was everything the Aural Dominion feared and revered. Serene, precise, resonant with authority that needed no volume to command obedience. "Lieutenant Commander Ward," she said, eyes locked on him like twin gravitational wells. "Do you deny the charges?" "No, Your Radiance." His voice stayed steady, barely. "I did what I'm accused of without authorization." Her jaw tightened by a fraction. For an Aural, that was a shout. "Explain," she said, carefully. Elias inhaled slowly. "Because if I hadn't acted, the shuttle wouldn't have survived. Your review protocols take 14 minutes. They had 6. My choice wasn't between obedience and rebellion. It was between 6 people living or dying. I chose life." The chamber fell into a silence so heavy it felt like pressurization failure. Aural officers shifted in visible shock. No one spoke so directly to the Empress. Calith's luminous markings dimmed, then brightened in a slow, analytical ripple. She was studying him. "Your reasoning," she said slowly, "places emotional priority over structural order. You elevate instinct above doctrine. This is precisely the human unpredictability the Dominion finds dangerous." "With respect," Elias replied, "if being predictable means letting innocent people die, then yes, I'll stay unpredictable." A few Aural advisors actually gasped. He was absolutely making this worse. Calith rose. The entire chamber reacted as though a star had shifted orbit. The Empress did not stand unless she intended to alter the course of something, law, fate, or a life. She descended from her dais with slow, graceful steps, each one echoing like a verdict. When she stopped in front of him, he felt her height, her power, her proximity. The faint, electrified ozone scent of Aural skin, like charged stardust drifting through air. "You defy me," she said quietly. "Even here, even now." "I'm not defying you, Your Radiance." Elias held her gaze. "I'm telling you the truth. I don't regret saving them, and if consequence is the price of that choice, then I'll pay it." Her eyes flickered shock, intrigue, amusement. Oral emotions were subtle, but something shifted. "You are either impossibly principled," she murmured, "or impossibly reckless." She stepped closer, too close, close enough that he could see the microfractals moving in her irises like shifting galaxies. Then, "Your punishment is confinement to quarters for 30 cycles, restricted duty thereafter, a reprimand placed in your permanent human military record." Elias exhaled. It could have been far, far worse. But then her voice lowered, so soft only he could hear. "And if you were not already bound to another," she whispered, "and if I were not Empress, I would ask for your personal frequency code." His heartbeat stuttered. The most powerful woman in the Dominion was flirting with him. Before he could react, she straightened, turned, and returned to her throne. "Remove him," she commanded. Guards escorted Elias from the tribunal while his mind tried. Elias Ward had expected confinement aboard the Auralin Sovereign to feel like imprisonment. Cold metal walls, no access to operations, no interaction beyond silent guards. That was what human military confinement usually meant. Instead, he stepped into quarters that looked like they belonged to a diplomat, not a disciplined officer. The room was spacious, with curved architecture and soft bioluminescent veins running through the walls like living circuitry. A full desk with data access, an oral-compliant comm console, a soft steam refresh chamber, even a panoramic viewport looking directly into the nebulaic swirl of the Neborus Rift. The bed was so comfortable it bordered on suspicious. For a punishment chamber, it felt disturbingly luxurious. Elias sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, letting the adrenaline drain from his system. The tribunal replayed in his head on a loop. Not the charges, not even the reprimand. Her words, the Empress's whisper, a whisper that should never have been spoken. "And if you were not already bound to another, I would ask for your personal frequency code." He shoved a hand through his hair. "What the hell am I supposed to do with that?" A notification chimed softly across the room. Elias frowned. No one should be contacting him, not in confinement. He walked to the console and froze. Incoming transmission. Imperial priority. Source Empress Calith Varilos. He almost didn't answer. Almost. The screen lit, forming the holographic silhouette of the Empress, dressed differently from the tribunal. No ceremonial armor. No cascading metal regalia. Just a simple, fitted diplomatic garment that made her look less like a cosmic ruler and more like a woman with impossible presence. Her markings glowed softly, less formal, less controlled. Yet her eyes, those luminous amethyst constellations, held the same terrifying focus. "Lieutenant Commander Ward," she said, "I am verifying your confinement conditions. Are you being treated properly?" Elias blinked. The Empress herself was checking on him. "Yes, your radiance, better than I deserve, honestly." She tilted her head. Barely a gesture, but with orals, that was the equivalent of narrowing one's eyes in curiosity. Punishment is corrective, not cruel. That is a distinction the Dominion maintains carefully. Her gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat too long. Elias tried not to read into it, tried and failed. Calith continued. "I have reviewed your tactical recordings from the incident. Your assessment of the ambush was accurate. Your response time was efficient." A faint pause. "Your violation was not without merit." That was the closest thing to praise an oral ruler gave. "Thank you," Elias said carefully, "but I know it doesn't excuse breaking protocol." "It does not," she agreed, though her tone softened. "But understanding your reasoning matters. You spoke with conviction today. Most beings dilute their arguments when facing judgment. You did not." "Because I meant what I said," Elias replied. "I'll always choose saving lives over procedure." Her markings brightened by a fraction, an oral physiological tell of heightened emotional processing. "You fascinate me, Lieutenant Commander," she said quietly. Elias' pulse spiked. She went on. "Humans behave with a type of emotional calculus orals do not fully understand. You act from instinct when we calculate probabilities. You trust feelings when we prioritize structure. It is chaotic, inefficient, occasionally absurd." She paused, "and yet it works, often shockingly well." He swallowed, unsure how to navigate the strange warmth behind those words. "Your radiance," he said carefully, respectfully, "these conversations, are they standard for confinement review?" She held his gaze too directly. Oral rulers rarely looked at anyone like this. "No," she said, "just that." Silence stretched, tense, electric, unspoken. Finally, she straightened, masking the flicker of something that should not have been in her expression. "I will contact you again, Lieutenant Commander," she said, "for continued assessment." The transmission ended. Elias exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He knew what had just happened. He knew what it meant. And it terrified him more than any starship hull breach. The Empress of the Dominion was intrigued by him, and that was dangerous in ways he didn't have vocabulary for. The days that followed blurred into routine, but not the routine he expected. Every cycle, at irregular, but deliberately unpredictable intervals, the Empress contacted him. Each call framed under the pretext of confinement review, but the topics drifted far beyond logistics. They debated strategic ethics. They compared human and oral concepts of loyalty. She asked what humans feared most. He asked why orals feared chaos so deeply. She questioned human, empathy-driven tactical decisions. He questioned oral, logic-first survival doctrine. What began as conversations turned into something else. An orbit neither of them intended to enter. A gravitational pull neither could break. Calith became less formal each time. Not unprofessional, never that, but more honest, more curious, more herself. Her eyes softened when she considered a new perspective he offered. Her markings brightened when she found something amusing. Her posture relaxed when she realized he wasn't intimidated by her authority. Elias found himself anticipating her calls, not because she was Empress, but because she was Calith, sharp, brilliant, unexpectedly funny, and damn it, so arrestingly beautiful it made his chest tighten every time the hologram flickered to life. He shouldn't feel this, he absolutely shouldn't. He wasn't single, he wasn't available, he wasn't allowed, but feelings weren't listening. One cycle, Calith ended their discussion early, an abruptness unusual for her. "Lieutenant Commander," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Before I depart, may I ask you a personal question?" Elias hesitated. "Yes, your radiance." Her eyes dimmed, then brightened again, oral hesitation. "Does your human bond satisfy you?" Elias froze. She saw it, his hesitation, his discomfort, and her markings dimmed in something like apology. "Forgive me," she said softly. "That was intrusive. I overstepped." "No," Elias answered, throat tight. "It's just complicated." Her eyes flickered. "You are conflicted," she said, not a question, a reading. "Orals cannot sense emotion the way humans." Elias hadn't seen Empress Calith in person since the tribunal. 30 cycles of confinement meant no bridge access, no strategy briefings, no passing glimpses of her moving through the command corridors like a blade of living starlight. But every time the comm console chimed with her encrypted signature, it felt as if the room shifted around him. Then, on cycle 27, the calls abruptly stopped. 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3, no message, no inquiry. Not even a standard protocol update. Elias tried not to care, tried and failed. It shouldn't have mattered. It did anyway. On the 31st cycle, his first official day released from confinement, Elias put on a fresh uniform, checked himself once in the viewport reflection, and walked into the Sovereign's main corridor. The ship felt different. Orals moved with sharper purpose, steps quicker, markings dimmer. Quiet tension hung in the air like static before a lightning discharge. Something had happened, something big. Before he could ask anyone, the intercom crackled. "Bridge to Lieutenant Commander Ward, report immediately." Bridge? Why the bridge? He wasn't scheduled for duty yet. Elias stepped into the lift with a knot forming in his chest. When the doors opened, the reason hit him instantly. Damage. Panels cracked. Support struts partially collapsed. Emergency crews working in synchronized urgency. And at the center of the chaos, radiant, commanding, unshaken, stood Empress Calith. Her hair had come loose from its usual precise coordination, streaks of starlit white falling over one shoulder. Her markings flickered erratically, oral shock response. Her armored mantle bore scorch marks from a plasma strike. And yet she moved with absolute control, issuing orders with quiet authority. Elias' breath caught. She was hurt, or had been, recently. He hadn't heard from her because she'd been fighting for the ship. He should not have felt relief at seeing her alive. He did anyway. Calith noticed him instantly. Her gaze locked onto him with a brightness that startled several officers nearby who pretended not to notice. "Lieutenant Commander Ward," she said, stepping toward him. "Good, you're unharmed." He blinked. "I heard nothing about the attack. What happened?" "A coordinated strike by Krail insurgents." Her tone was calm, but the flicker in her markings betrayed residual adrenaline. "They managed to breach our aft perimeter shields. The gravitational core destabilized. We executed a high-risk distortion maneuver." Elias knew exactly what that meant. That could have torn the ship in half. "Yes," she said simply, but it didn't. Her eyes scanned him once, quick, clinical, almost disguised as inspection. But Elias felt the way her gaze lingered at his hands, his stance, the subtle signs of emotional reaction etched across his face. "You look troubled," she observed. "You were out of contact for days," he said before thinking. "I didn't know if—" He stopped himself, too honest, too raw. Kaleth's expression shifted, softened in a way no oral should show in public. "I am alive," she said quietly. "Your concern is noted." Before either could say more, a structural beam high above groaned violently. A warning alarm shrieked. A support strut ripped free. The ceiling buckled. There was no time to think. Elias moved. He lunged toward the Empress just as a cascade of fractured alloy crashed downward. His body collided with hers, hard, protective, instinctive. They hit the floor as a massive support assembly slammed into the deck where she had been standing a heartbeat earlier. Sparks rained around them. Emergency shields flickered. Oral officers shouted in panicked tones he had never heard before. But all Elias felt was her weight beneath him, her breath against his throat. Her hands gripping his uniform, steady, strong, alive. For a moment the universe narrowed to two heartbeats, one human, one alien beating far too close. Kaleth looked up at him, eyes wide, not in fear, but in something far more dangerous. "Elias," she whispered. She had never used his given name before. Never. His pulse thundered. He should move, should pull away. Should re-establish the boundaries they kept pretending existed. He didn't, not for several unbearable seconds. Lights stabilized. Alarms faded. Officers regained control of the situation. Reality snapped back. Elias forced himself upward, lifting the beam enough for her to slide free. He offered a hand. She took it. Their fingers lingered half a second longer than they should have. Kaleth straightened, regaining imperial composure with breathtaking speed, though her markings still flickered with adrenaline. "Lieutenant Commander Ward," she said in a low, controlled tone meant only for him. "You shielded me at great personal risk." "It wasn't a choice," he said. "It was instinct." Her eyes softened again. "Instinct," she repeated as if tasting the word. "Humans are ruled by it, orals avoid it, and yet it saves lives." A silence stretched between them, charged, dangerous, undeniable. Then Kaleth stepped closer, too close. Close enough that her voice reached only him. "Elias," she murmured, "this cannot continue." He swallowed. "What can't?" This, a flick of her eyes too vulnerable for a ruler toward the space between them. "This, gravitational pull. It compromises judgment, yours, mine." "So you feel it too," he said softly, surprising even himself. Her breath hitched, barely, but he saw it. "I feel many things I should not," she admitted, no longer Empress, just Kaleth for one fractured moment. "And you must not encourage them." His heart twisted. "I'm not trying to," he whispered, "but I can't pretend it isn't there." Her eyes glowed brighter, conflicted, wounded, wanting. Then instantly her posture snapped back to imperial rigidity. "This conversation is over," she said. "Return to your quarters, await reassignment." Elias hesitated. "Kaleth." "Do not," she said sharply, "say my name like that. Not here, not now." She turned away before he could respond. And Elias realized, as he watched her walk across the damaged bridge, commanding an empire, Elias Ward had endured silence before, long patrol cycles, blackout operations, dead calm zones, but nothing compared to Kaleth's silence. After the bridge collapse, after he dragged her out of the falling structure, after she whispered his name like it meant something, she withdrew behind a wall of imperial formality thicker than starshield plating. No more encrypted check-ins, no more philosophical debates, no more accidental softness in her voice. "Now, Lieutenant Commander Ward, report. Your analysis is noted. You are dismissed. Every word perfectly professional. Every gesture strictly imperial. Every glance cool, measured, distant. It shouldn't have stung. It did. Because Elias knew what he had seen on that bridge floor, raw feeling flickering behind amethyst eyes, a vulnerability she never showed anyone. And now she was pretending none of it had happened. Elias tried to focus on duty, tried to forget the warmth of her breath against his throat, tried to ignore the way his heart reacted every time she entered a room, sharp, immediate, traitorous. But it was impossible not to feel the rift widening inside him. At first he assumed she was punishing herself, or him, or the situation, but days passed, then more days. Her distance wasn't anger, it was fear. Not fear of him, Kaleth didn't fear anyone, fear of what she felt. Then the message arrived, a human transmission delayed by 12 hours due to the Sovereign's position. From Maritrent, his partner back on Earth. Elias stared at the blinking notification before opening it. Her voice was weary, controlled, hurting. Elias, I don't know what's happening with us. You feel so far away, not because of the distance, because of you, I can feel you slipping. And I don't know why. He closed his eyes, heart sinking. And I know we haven't talked about it, but there are rumors here, about you and the Empress, about favoritism, about closeness. He felt heat rise to his face, not guilt. Recognition people had noticed, even across light years. I love you, she said softly. But I can't be in a relationship with someone who's already half gone. If you want us, tell me. If not, please be honest. The message ended. Elias sat in silence, staring at nothing, feeling a tension he'd been refusing to acknowledge tighten around his chest like a pressure seal. He wasn't cheating. He hadn't lied. He hadn't crossed any physical line, but emotionally. He was no longer on Earth. Half of him was orbiting a woman who shouldn't matter, who couldn't matter, who had every reason to stay distant. And yet part of him still burned from the way she whispered his name on the bridge. He had to make a choice, or everything Earth Duty Caliph himself would collapse under the weight of indecision. He avoided Caliph for 2 days. He skipped invitations to planning sessions. He sent reports through sub-chiefs instead of delivering them in person. He altered his path through the ship to avoid running into her. It didn't work. On the 3rd day, as he stepped out of a lift, she was waiting, not flanked by guards. Not on her throne, just standing alone in a quiet corridor illuminated by soft gold lumlight. "Lieutenant Commander," she said, voice controlled, too controlled. "You have been distant." He almost laughed at the irony. "With respect, Your Radiance," he replied. "I'm trying to maintain appropriate boundaries." Her markings flickered, brief irritation quickly suppressed. "Is that what you believe this is? A boundary or a retreat?" He stiffened. "I'm doing what's necessary." "For whom?" she asked quietly. "For the Dominion, for your duty, for your human bond, or for yourself?" He clenched his jaw. "For all of them." A thin silence stretched between them. Then she stepped closer, just a fraction, just enough to force him to confront the truth in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said, voice low, "and then you ran from me." "That's not." "It is," she cut in. "You withdrew the moment you realized what almost happened between us." Elias felt something inside him crack. "What almost happened," he said slowly, "could destroy both our lives." Her throat shifted in a tiny, controlled swallow. "I know, and you're pretending it meant nothing," he said. "That's not helping." Calith's voice softened, not as Empress, but as Calith. It meant too much. The admission hit him harder than any plasma blast he had taken. Her markings dimmed with vulnerability she would never show another living being. "That," she whispered, "is why I distanced myself." She stepped even closer, "and why you must stop running." Elias' heartbeat thundered. "This is impossible," he said. "You're the Empress, I'm a junior officer, I'm bonded to someone on Earth, and you." "Feel something I should not," she finished quietly. "As do you." The corridor felt too small, the air too thin. The distance between them dangerous. Calith's voice dropped, barely audible. "This," she said, eyes locked on his, "is the breaking point, Elias. Pretend it is nothing or admit what we both already know." He swallowed, he knew the choice. He knew the consequences, he knew the truth, but before he could speak. An alarm blared through the corridor. "All personnel to Strategic Command, Priority 1. Calith's markings flared bright with alarm. "Another crisis," she murmured. The Sovereign rarely felt small. A ship that spanned nearly 2 kilometers, bristling with gravitational lances and shield arrays, commanded respect simply by existing, but under full alert. Under the pulsing crimson emergency lights and the thrum of activated battle cores, it felt alive, uneasy, hunting for survival. Elias sprinted into Strategic Command, pulse racing. He expected chaos. Instead, he found something worse. Silence. A ring of high-ranking oral strategists stood stiff and focused around the central holodisplay, its surface showing a crackling red projection of incoming vessels. Not raiders, not insurgents. A splinter faction of the Krail Dominion, fully militarized and heavily coordinated. Calith stood at the center, back straight, posture flawless despite the exhaustion Elias saw in the faint tremor of her markings, a flicker so subtle no other human would ever notice. She didn't look at him, not at first, but the moment she heard his footsteps, she did. Just a brief glance, one heartbeat, but enough to confirm everything between them was still burning beneath the surface. Elias forced his gaze to the hologram. "Threat projection?" he asked the nearest strategist. "Severe," the officer replied. "The Krail ships are using a frequency-modulated shield Tesla array. Our standard lances can't breach it." "So they'll hit the core," Elias said. They intend to cripple the sovereign entirely, the strategist confirmed, to weaken the Dominion and destabilize the Empress's authority. Elia's stomach tightened. This wasn't a battle. This was a coup attempt. Calith raised a hand, silencing the room. The Krail believes striking us now, while structural repairs remain incomplete, will force my surrender. They assume we cannot maneuver. They are mistaken. Her voice hardened. We will execute an inverted gravitational shear. A murmur rippled through the officers. That could kill us, someone said. That, Calith replied coldly, is why we must time it perfectly. She turned to Elias, her eyes locked onto his. Not as Empress, but as someone who had been waiting to speak to him alone. Lieutenant Commander Ward, she said, your assessment. Elias stepped forward. Every oral officer watched him with a mix of irritation and respect. Irritation because he was human, respect because he had already proven he saw what they missed. He studied the hologram. Their approach vector is too clean, he said. They're hurting us, forcing us into a single predictable response. Calith's brow tightened. You believe they anticipate the shear? Yes, Elias said. They want you to execute it. They think you'll choose the boldest option because it's strategically optimal. And they plan to exploit it, Calith murmured, finishing his reasoning. Elias nodded. They want you in checkmate, Calith. The moment the name left his lips, the entire command center froze. Several oral strategists recoiled. One gasped. Another whispered sharply, but Calith. Calith did not flinch. Her gaze held his unbroken. Then what do you propose? She asked calmly. A collective shock rippled around them. Only Elias mattered to her in that moment. Only his answer. He swallowed. Don't shear, he said. Invert their expectation. Drop us instead. A strategist hissed in alarm. A freefall descent into the rift, that is suicide. No, Elias said. It's camouflage. The rift's magnetic storm will scramble their targeting systems. If we descend fast enough, their lock will break. When they lose us, you rise from the blind spot and fire at their weakest vector. Silence, then Calith spoke, her markings brightened. Do it. The room exploded into motion. Minutes later, the Sovereign tilted violently as gravity wells disengaged, and the massive ship began a controlled freefall into the raging nebula storm. Elias braced himself against the command rail as the deck trembled under the force of gravitational distortion. Plasma discharges cascaded past the viewports in violent arcs. The ship shook again, hard. A console exploded, showering sparks. An officer went down. Calith grabbed the railing with one hand, her posture unbroken even as the ship screamed through the rift turbulence. Status, she demanded. Targeting lost us, an officer cried. Their firing solutions are collapsing. Elias exhaled sharply. It was working. Calith met his gaze across the command platform, a silent acknowledgement, trust, unity. Then, a sudden impact hurled them sideways. The Sovereign spun, once, twice, before stabilizers kicked in. Calith stumbled for the first time in Elias' memory. He lunged instinctively, catching her arm before she fell. Her eyes widened at the contact. She didn't pull away, not at first. You're hurt, Elias whispered. I am not, she said, too fast, too defensive. He tightened his grip, feeling the tremor in her muscles. This isn't the time to pretend. Something flickered in her expression. Something raw, something human in its fragility. But the bridge lights flashed green. Lock restored, firing solution ready. Calith straightened instantly. Execute, she commanded. A thunderous blast reverberated through the ship as gravitational lances punched through the Krail flagship, splitting it cleanly in two. The battle ended in seconds. Oral officers erupted into triumphant declarations. Calith didn't celebrate. She simply turned to Elias, her voice low, dangerous. Follow me. She led him through a private access corridor, one reserved for the Empress and High Command. Elias followed in tense silence until the doors sealed behind them. She faced him, every wall she'd rebuilt around herself gone. You spoke my name, she said quietly. You asked me to stop running, he replied. Her voice cracked, not audibly, but in the subtle shift of her breathing. You cannot say my name like that. Why? Elias stepped closer. Because it means something, because it felt real, because you felt something too. Because it is forbidden, she said, but true. The word hung between them like a gravitational well. Calith's markings dimmed fear, brightened desire, flickered conflict. Elias, she whispered, not resisting this time. I cannot want what I want, and I can't pretend I don't. She closed her eyes. We are at the edge of a vortex from which there is no return. Then stop pretending it isn't pulling us both. She opened her eyes. The truth in them nearly broke him. This, she breathed, is a fracture that will change everything. Yes, Elia said, and pretending won't fix it. We need to talk, really talk, about us, about what this is. Her voice cut in, trembling. No. For the first time since joining the Sovereign, Elia's ward stood in Empress Calith's private chamber. Not summoned for strategy, not reprimanded, not hiding behind protocol. Just him, just her. And the unspoken truth stretching between them like a star bridge. Calith dismissed her guards with a single gesture. The doors sealed behind them, locking out the entire dominion. Her markings shimmered in restless patterns, fear, desire, conflict, shifting like weather across her luminous skin. This is unwise, she said quietly. Her voice held none of the steel she commanded armies with, only a trembling honesty. Elias stepped closer, probably. I am Empress, she continued. My choices change the course of empires. I know. And you, she said, eyes tightening, are a human officer whose presence in my life is already causing political fractures. I know that too. She exhaled a long, shaking breath she would never allow her council to witness. Then why, she whispered, are you still here? Elias swallowed, because I choose you. Her markings flared bright and sudden. And because, he added, I'm done pretending otherwise. Calith's voice cracked. You choose me knowing what it means. Yes, it means isolation, scrutiny, danger. Yes, it means opponents from both species will try to tear us apart. Let them try. It means you will never again be just an officer. I'd rather be myself with you, Elias said, than safe without you. Her breath hitched, not dramatically, not humanly, but in the faint, trembling flicker of bioluminescent patterns along her collarbones. It was the oral equivalent of a heart skipping a beat. She stepped forward, stopping inches from him. You ended your human bond, she said softly. Not for me, but because it was dying. Yes. And now, she whispered, you stand on the edge of a precipice. If I take one step toward you, there is no return. Elia's voice came out quiet but steady. Then step. For one agonizing moment she stood frozen, empress, ruler, commander, burdened by an entire civilization. Then she moved, not fast, not impulsively, but with deliberate intention, as if she was choosing to rewrite the fate of two species. She reached up and touched his face. Her hand was warm, her fingers trembling just slightly. Her touch felt like starlight made physical. And finally, Calith kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss, it wasn't rushed, it was slow. Careful, as if she was learning him, mapping the shapes of a human emotion she had never allowed herself to feel. Elias pulled her gently closer and Calith let out a soft sound, half surprise, half surrender, that nearly undid him. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against his. This, she whispered, is treason to my own rules. Then change the rules. Her eyes fluttered shut. I think I already have. The announcement went out the next day. Not leaked gossip, not speculation, not rumor, a formal imperial broadcast. By decree of the Empress, the Dominion recognizes the sanctioned bond between Empress Calith Varailos and human Lieutenant Commander Elias Ward. Chaos erupted instantly. Conservative oral high houses called it disgraceful. Human politicians accused Elias of compromising interspecies neutrality. News cycles exploded. Council chambers shook with arguments. Military leaders demanded explanations. But Calith stood before all of them, radiant, calm, unmovable. I chose him, she said, and I do not rescind my choice. And that ended the debate. Because no one, not generals, not noble houses, not ambassadors, won arguments against Empress Calith. The ceremony took place beneath the twin moons of Aurelian Prime. Cloaked in starlit regalia, Calith walked the ceremonial path flanked by her honor guard. Elias stood opposite her in formal human dress uniform, hands steady despite the billions watching. Oral traditions dictated a ritual of light, two beings exchanging luminous resonance through a crystalline conduit. Humans had no equivalent, so Calith had adapted it. She had included human vows and oral ones. And then something entirely new, something made for them. When she placed her hand in his, the crystal between them ignited in a brilliant convergence of violet and gold. Her markings responded instantly, glowing brighter than he had ever seen. Elias Ward, she said, voice resonant and intimate despite the global broadcast. You have challenged my logic, defied my authority, and altered the trajectory of my life. A faint smile touched her lips. You have taught me that emotion is not weakness, but another form of clarity. Elias tightened his grip on her hand. "Caliph," he said softly, "you saved me long before I saved you. You showed me that strength isn't just command or discipline. Sometimes it's vulnerability. Sometimes it's choosing someone even when the galaxy tells you not to." Her eyes shimmered. Then the officiant spoke the binding words. "By union of resonance and oath, your lives align. 2 empires witness, 2 hearts agree." The crystal pulsed. Caliph leaned in. This kiss was different from the first, less hesitant, more certain, a vow written without words. When they finally parted, the gathered audience erupted, not universally in praise, but in undeniable acknowledgement. A change had begun, a new chapter in both their civilizations, and Caliph whispered so only he could hear. "If I could return to the moment in the tribunal, when I told you I would give you my frequency."
No. No, güey, es que manejar bien a la ofensiva está culero, güey. Aquí son bien culeros en México, güey. Son bien culeros en México. No mames, así manejo yo, güey. Oye, Misa, ¿qué te pasó ese día que casi te tira el cable del que te encontraste en la noche? No mames, güey, eso es bien peligroso. No sé por qué no denunciaste. Al chile fácil le hubiera sacado unos 30,000 pesos de multa por dejar su puto cable colgando así. Hay un restaurante coreano bien rico por aquí. A ver.